It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, brought to you by Colton Steakhouse and Thompson Sales. Here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome into another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Puryear. As always, big thank you to you, our viewers and listeners, each week as we talk local and regional sports here on the podcast. And big thank you to our sponsors, Thompson Sales, and our newest sponsor, Colton Steakhouse here in Springfield. We're going to talk more about Thompson's later in the program, and we'll get Thomas Orr with Colton's on to talk about the great food they've got. It's one of my favorites, and I'm sure most Springfieldians are aware that hard to find a better steak than at Colton Steakhouse. Special guest this week, it's time to wrap up some St. Louis Cardinals baseball, and for that, we always turn to our friend in St. Louis, a Kickapoo grad, the founder and manager and chief content man of STLSportsPage.com, Mr. Rob Raines. Rob, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Scott, for having me. Appreciate it.
You betcha. I know I thought about it a couple weeks ago. I said, let's let the dust settle a little bit and kind of get into the playoffs now with MLB, and kind of give us your thoughts on that situation now with the Dodgers and Brewers, and then the Mariners taking command against Toronto in the ALCS.
The pilots revived, that would be awesome. So that's my rooting interest is those couple clubs, and it's been exciting so far. There've been some great games, and obviously that 15-inning game in Seattle the other night was unbelievable. So I think the playoffs always don't disappoint, but so far this year even better than normal.
Either team or any of the four teams surprise, obviously not the Dodgers being there, but what about the other three?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think I forget now which year it was, but they said it's the first time you had, four division champs in the LCSs for a while. No wild card team snuck in there, which I think is good. I think these guys are the ones that earned it. Milwaukee, of course, had the best record in baseball, 97 wins, and I think they're the four that deserve to be there. So any combination of results won't really bother me. I mean, I think they're all deserving clubs.
Do you see a Seattle Dodgers World Series matchup?
I hope not, because I want Milwaukee to win. But I think, the Dodgers are awful good. When you outspend everybody by twice as much money as everybody else, it's hard not to have the best players. So we'll see. I mean, I think that I've seen a couple things written that it's kind of the big guys against everybody else, and that if baseball obviously is headed for some labor trouble here at the end of the 2026 season, and that if the Dodgers can win back-to-back World Series just by outspending everybody, that's going to kind of strengthen the resolve of some of the other owners to stick to their guns about wanting to get a salary cap, which is going to be, I think, a tough thing for the Players Association to accept, because they've said they never will accept it. So that's another reason to be. I don't know if you're rooting for the Dodgers or Milwaukee, but in that scenario, but maybe if Milwaukee wins, then you can say, okay, see, a little guy can still, slay the Giants. So we'll see what happens.
Speaking of that labor dispute coming up, what are you hearing in terms of maybe a possible length? I mean, could we lose the 27 season, you think, or part of it?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was part of it. I mean, I think obviously the deal is done the end of December. The current agreement expires in December 2026. So we may get some kind of an inkling about what to expect when we actually see when negotiations begin and how seriously they take it during the course of next season, how far in advance of that deadline they try to actually start talking about an agreement. But, usually, like we all know, deadlines are kind of what spur reactions and spur, things kind of coming to a settlement. So then you're looking at spring training, and then we've seen obviously spring training wiped out before because of labor disputes not that long ago. So the real deadline is the start of opening day, and I think I would not be surprised if the labor disagreement lingers into the season. You'd hate to think that it would cancel the entire season, but I just don't know what the resolve of both sides is going to be.
Am I correct that in that situation, if it comes up, the players are not getting paid once the season starts, or am I incorrect?
No, they don't get paid except during the season, but I think that they have obviously prepared, financially for the possibility of a work stoppage, and the union has very, collected money from. I think a lot of times they withhold the licensing money from players for a couple of years in advance of that, so they can distribute it during, it's kind of a strike fund once something happens. So also depends if it's an actual strike, or if it's a lockout by the owners. I think that has a determining factor of how that is all resolved as well. But no, it would be a financial hardship for both sides. There's no question.
What's the longest stoppage we've ever had?
94, right? When they canceled the World Series, like from the last couple months of the season. And then it lingered into the first month of 95 when they were actually about to start the season within 48 hours of starting the season with replacement players. I would think that's off the top of my head. I would say that's probably the longest.
I thought that might be one of the 30 books you've written. That would not be the most interesting reading, would it? The labor problems. Yeah.
I'm not a labor lawyer. Don't tend to be, don't want to be. So yeah, the longer, the more they can play, actually just go out and play games, and I can talk about what happens on the field, the better.
Have you got any new books in the works, and what's the most recent one?
The new one actually out is called All Roads Lead to St. Louis. It was a book that my wife Sally and I did we did it before the pandemic, and then it got kind of screwed up because of the pandemic. It was a guide to all the Cardinal minor league clubs and kind of talking about all the different teams, and it was kind of a tour guide in one sense too, because we talked about places to go in the city, those cities and stuff. So when the COVID hit, and then a couple of the teams got wiped out, they were kind of fell by the wayside. But we brought it back out this summer as kind of a revised edition, and it's out there now. So yeah, it's some history thing. We actually ended up including some of the profile stories that I've written the last couple of years about some of the Cardinal minor league players, including some of the guys from Springfield and stuff. So it's fun. So that's the newest one.
Anything in the works going forward?
Not at the moment. I'm so busy doing day-to-day stuff with the website that, feature stories and stuff like that I just haven't, there've been a few ideas that we've talked about and kicked around, but never really got them too far down the road.
And I like the podcast with your son. How long has that been?
We started that, I guess, in 23, right? Yeah. So the end of 2023, we decided to start doing that. It's usually once a week during the season. Reigns on the Cardinals is the name of that. You can find it anywhere. Download all your YouTube and Spotify and all those things. Technically that I'm not very hip on, but it's there, so you can find it. So yeah, we're not doing it as often during the winter, kind of depending on what happens with the Cardinals with news. When news happens, we'll do something, but every week during the season. So it's been fun. It's been a fun project, and my wife Sally's the producer of that, so it's kind of a family affair, and she does all the heavy lifting. So
I'm sure
it's fun.
You still have to buy lunch after you're all done, right? I mean, it's you're
well, since we usually tape it at our house, we can just move upstairs to the kitchen. I don't have to actually pay any extra money.
Let's talk about the Cardinals, 78 and 84 this season, fourth in the NL Central standings. If you had to do an elevator speech recapping this season, what would it be?
About as expected. I think when you look into this club before the start of the season, I basically told everybody I thought they were a 500 club, and they were close to that, and probably could have been a 500 had they not traded off some of the people they traded off at the deadline. So I think they had some good things happen. They had some bad things happen. They had some kind of, I don't know yet whether they were good or bad things happen with some of the young players. You knew going in, if they actually were committing to their plan of playing as giving all the young players their quote unquote runway this season, that there would be hits and misses in that. You just didn't know necessarily which ones would be which. So I would say all in all, probably was about as expected. You probably didn't get as good of performances. The thing that would have made a difference, it had some of your veteran starters pitch better, which could have won a few more ball games. They thought, that Michaelis and Fetty and obviously Palante would have better seasons than they had. So that was probably the biggest reason why they finished where they did.
The drop off in attendance. I mean, you knew it was coming. You'd seen it building the last couple of years. Was it worse than you expected? And what was it like to go to the ballpark on those nights and just a surreal setting from what you were used to all those years when they were competitive?
I had two thoughts about it. Number one is there's still an awful lot of teams that would have been happy to have the attendance that the Cardinals had, and it still was a fun time at the ballpark. But I think, the fans were trying to send a message. I mean, this is now you've gone, 12 years without being in the World Series. You've gone 14 years without winning the World Series, and I think that's the expectation level here. I mean, you've won one playoff game in the last 5 years. That wasn't even a home game. That was a road game in the wild card round. You haven't won a series since 2019. So I think that the fans are, saying that they want this club to be better. They want to be more competitive, and they don't just want to try to sneak in and be the third wildcard team. So I think they're trying to, and the tickets, as we all know, tickets aren't cheap. So, I think that they're speaking with their pocketbook. And I also think there is a factor in St. Louis, which I think is something that the Cardinals can't really avoid, but I know they're aware of it. And that's, a lot of people don't want to go downtown. I mean, they just feel like it's not a safe situation, especially late at night, leaving the ballpark. So, I don't know how they combat that. I mean, they've tried to talk about it, to have some extra security. They're trying to get this entertainment district passed as far as the legislation goes in the state, which would then increase some resources that they could have available to them, and the Blues as well, and the soccer team, to have extra police presence in those areas on game nights. So maybe that will help. But I think the bottom line is, I think if this was a winning club, if this club was a team that was going for the pennant in September, I think you'd be selling out the ballpark, even with the safety concerns.
You're, as a sports writer, you're there late, and in a lot of cases, by the time you finish interviewing and make your way back up to the press box, and I don't know if you do stuff there, if you just head home and do it at home, but have you ever felt unsafe when you've left at night some of those times?
I've never been mugged on the street, but yeah, we parked a couple blocks away from the stadium too. It's one of those things that I don't feel unsafe when I'm in a crowd. I think the like you said, later, if it's 12:30, midnight, whatever, when we're leaving and there's nobody else on the street, I would probably be a little bit more apprehensive. But I've had panhandlers out there wanting money and things like that, but I've never been tried to anything other than keep walking past them.
Well, the 2025 season marked the end of an era with John Mozeliak retiring. The Chaim Bloom era now fully underway. How should we remember Mozeliak, and how do you think fans will remember him?
Well, I think he'll get a red jacket at some point and be in the Cardinals Hall of Fame. I think he, did obviously some good things, when he started out. I think, he got a little stale, which is to be expected when you spend, close to 30 years in that organization, 18 years in that top job. That's a lot of pressure. I mean, that's a lot of hard work, and you're obviously, have to make some tough decisions, but you also are incumbent on players doing what you expect them to do. So, some of the things that happened, I don't know if they were necessarily his fault. I mean, I think that, some things that happened, like, Oscar Taveras getting, killed in a car wreck, Alex Reyes getting hurt, they're just things that happened in the course of a baseball career that unfortunately derailed this club a little bit. So some of the trades, probably didn't work out like they wanted to. I think maybe they got a little bit gun shy about making trades the last few years because they had some deals that didn't work out and were afraid to take that risk. Some of the young players that they're counted on didn't produce the way they expected them to. But I think all in all, he did a good job. I think you don't stay in that chair for as long as he did in baseball if you're not doing a good job.
And and I'm not there around it daily, but I think the impression I got is some fans, started cooling to the, I guess, I don't know if it's arrogance or attitude of Mo and things like that. And I just think that those things are okay when somebody's winning. You don't notice those things. It's when you have a chance to pounce as a fan and you're angry. That's when you start bringing those things up. Did you always find him a good professional working relationship?
Oh yeah, no, he was fine. He was available when you needed to ask a question. He answered your questions, and it's a little more available when they were winning than when they were losing. But that's to be expected. But it's funny because people always talk about, well, this club's got a great chemistry because they're winning. There's no, you never hear about teams having a bad chemistry if they're winning. So I think that. He was a little bit of a victim of that too. And I think it was time for a change. I mean, I think it was a new voice is good coming in, new ideas, new perspective. Doesn't, the one thing that they always talk about in baseball, and I think it is true in most cases because he was there for so long, is that, loyalty is a virtue, but it's also a curse. And I think that that's true. When you have a history with players, he drafted some of these guys, he watched them develop. It's hard to trade those guys, and I think the thing about Chaim is that he won't have that connection with the history of these players. So if he does feel like there's a move that needs to be made that, it's going to maybe be a tough trade to make because it's a popular player, a guy who grew up in the system, he's not going to have that reluctance to make it simply because of the history of the player in St. Louis.
The most stuff reminds me of the Baker Mayfield comments here in the last week or two, where they were asking him about, his demeanor on the field. And, when he was young, he was cocky and brash and all this. And now he's got moxie, he said, and so depends on if you're winning or not, what the approach is and the attitude about those things. But has St. Louis warmed up any more or less to Ollie Marmol?
Yeah, I think I don't know the answer to that question. Again, I think it's a matter of winning. I think they'll warm up to him if the club is winning. I think he was also a victim of, people, having higher expectations for the team than maybe the team had for themselves. And, manager's always the first person to blame, because you can't, blame 25 players, or it's harder to blame 25 players. So he took the brunt of that a little bit too. I think he was in a tough spot this year, because they knew they didn't have a club, at least they expected they didn't have a club that would be competing for a division, but they still wanted to win as many games as they could, because they knew that's what fans wanted them to do. But they also didn't want to, not give these young guys a chance to play. So when some of those young guys like Jordan Walker, like Nolan Gorman, didn't produce at quite to the level that they expected to do, that cost them wins. And he's the guy that took the brunt of that. So I think there were people that were hoping when Chaim came in that there might be a change in managers, because of the loyalty thing, but he was already under contract for next year. You also don't know what's going to happen in the 2027 season. If you don't expect to contend in 2026, does it make sense to be paying two managers at the same time? And I also felt like, I just couldn't, everything I've done with Chaim and everything that I've kind of looked into him and his background, I just couldn't figure out who in his past would be a logical replacement that he would bring in that he already had a working relationship with. So for all those reasons, I wasn't surprised that he brought it back. Now we'll see what happens, over the course of next season. So, I'm not saying he's going to be the Cardinal manager for the next 10 years, but, I think that, it made sense that he stayed in the job for now.
Well, and his leash has got to be a little longer now, doesn't it, with the admitted reload? It's hard to blame a guy for not having, as they say, the Jimmies and Joes, as a lot of coaches say. I mean, do you agree? I mean, is he
maybe? I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be depending on what they're trying to get some fans back. So if they feel like that's a move that might and again, who's available as far as a possible replacement is concerned. So I think that he'll start the season here, and then we'll just kind of see how it goes.
Mike Schilt, recently
retired.
That's not going to
happen. Yeah, that's not going to happen. He kind of indicated after he made his surprising retirement from the Padres that he was just going to go home and sit for a while, that he was physically, mentally, and emotionally just kind of worn out. So I hope for the best for Mike. I've known him a long time and think the world of him, and was very surprised when I heard that news, but I just hope he's okay.
What do you expect to be different about the organization with Chaim Bloom in charge now? I mean, is it analytics? Is it more of a people-based approach? Tell us about Chaim Bloom and what you expect going forward.
Yeah, I wrote a real in-depth profile of him on the STL Sports page here last week. So if anybody interested in that didn't see it, could go on the website, stlsportspage.com, and find it. And it's, he was very interesting. He very openly talked about, kind of everything that he believes and what makes him tick. And I think he's one thing about him that I found out is he's very smart. I think he's not necessarily an analytical guy, but he understands the value of analytics. But I also think he is a people person. I mean, he's talked about increasing the scouting department size. They've definitely upped the number of personnel in the minor league departments and the personnel departments and the performance departments. So they're going to actually add to that some more this winter. So I think he understands that the best clubs are the ones that have good combination of both the system working for you, as well as the instructors and boots on the ground scouts and coaches and stuff. So I think that's good. I mean, I think the infrastructure is definitely going to be better. They've improved the technology at the minor league level, so the information that's available to them. I think they really have to do a better job of kind of evaluating their own players. I think that's sometimes where things fall short a little bit, is you maybe think your guy's a little bit better than he is because he's your guy. They've got, obviously some overlap in the organization as far as, that he's going to have to reconfigure that roster with the too many left-handed hitting middle infielders. They've got to figure out a spot, where they want J.J. Weatherholt to play. So I think he's not going to be afraid to make moves that need to be made, and it's going to be interesting to see, the kind of talent that he tries to bring in here.
So who do you see in the comings and goings from the existing roster, November, December into spring training? I know there's a lot of questions. I mean, there's There's a couple Nolans that will figure in big with Arenado and Gorman.
Yeah.
What to do with them and other guys. Kind of give us your thoughts on, position player wise first, what you think may happen.
Well, it's really no different than last winter. They really want to trade Arenado. We'll see if they can get it done. I think two things have to happen. Number one, he has to expand his list of clubs that he'd be willing to go to over what it was last year, the 5 clubs that really didn't have any interest in him. And then beyond that, they're going to have to obviously eat more of the contract probably than they would have had to in the past, but it's only got 2 years left. So it's not, an insurmountable amount of money. So I think that's number one, because I think if you can trade him, then obviously Gorman, I think, can stay and be your, penciled in as your starting third baseman. I mean, he's got a little bit longer track record than a guy like Jordan Walker, but I think they've got to figure out that first. And they got to, obviously figure out, the outfield situation. They've got to get better as far as, some power potential out of the outfield, whether that's internally, whether that's guys they've already got, or whether that's going out and get somebody. They've talked about, any decisions that they make are basically going to be more toward long-term than short-term. So I think you might only see a couple of like real minor, free agent kind of short-term deals just to kind of bridge the gap till they get some of their other prospects ready. They're going to need to improve the starting pitching. So Haim's got his work cut out for him, but I think, I would say a guy like Arenado's first. I would say a guy like Newpark could very much be in play because he's going to start making some money. Perhaps Brendan Donovan, even though I think they really like Donovan. But again, that's part of that log jam in the middle infield if you're trying to open up a spot for Weatherholt. So, and you also have to look at a guy like Burleson and even maybe a guy like Ivan Herrera, because the other thing about making trades is that you have to have somebody that other people want, and you have to have something that you have to be able to move that player and get something back that you need that might be better than what you have. And, fortunately just trading, always trading your, 10th reliever or 5th starter or, last bat on the bench, that's not going to necessarily bring you an all-star in return.
It's like a garage sale. I mean, you put everything out and hope it's all gone, and you end up putting most of it back in the garage, for another year. Because
I don't think there's really – I don't think there's really any untouchables on this roster, except maybe, obviously Libator and McGreevy you're probably not going to trade because you need somebody to start, and they're not going to trade Weatherholt. But I think everybody else, even a guy like Mason Wynn, because Weatherholt's a shortstop too. So, as good a player as he is, I think if somebody comes calling you and say, hey, we're going to trade you, the next, Mike Trout for, Mason Wynn, I think you got to listen, and I think you got to look at it, and I think Chaim will.
What did you think of Wynn's full season? The numbers just don't jump off the page. And, of course, that's not factoring the defense. I mean, is he still a guy that you feel like they want to build around?
I think so. I do, simply because of the defense and the position that he plays. But, again, he needs to hit better than he did. I thought he was miscast a little bit as the leadoff hitter. I still don't understand why they didn't try Victor Scott II more as the leadoff guy, when he has the potential to steal, 50 or 60 bases, but he just never ran when he was batting ninth that much. So, I'll be interested to see if Chaim has an influence in that area when they, comes to lineup construction as we get closer to spring training. But, I think they like Wynn. I think they'd like him to hit better. They obviously think he's a great defensive shortstop. I think he can be a pretty good team leader on that team, even though he's a young player. So, I would expect he'll be back, but you never know.
I was shocked when I went and looked up Nolan Gorman's age to see that he's 25. I mean, it seems like we've been talking about him so long, he should be 35 or 40 by now. Do you still see that? I mean, what is he, a 30 home run bat in waiting with probably a 225 average, but capable of driving in 100 runs? I mean, you still see that there?
Yeah, I don't know quite that much, but I think he's better than he was in 2025. I think he could be a better player than that. I mean, I think he's one of those guys, and I would throw Jordan Walker into the same mix as well, really, is that he's one of those guys that they're still young, but they've been through so much the last couple of years with different people telling them what to do, and something works and they try to switch to it, and then something doesn't work, so they fall back into bad habits. So, I think both those guys really just kind of have to clear their mind and just go play the game the way they've always played it and just have fun and just stop listening to all the voices in their head. So, one thing I do know about Chaim that I was told by people who worked with him and known him for a long time is that because he does have roots in player development, he has the ability to be patient, and that he's not going to make any rash decisions or trade somebody, simply because they had one bad year, so that he knows it's going to take time to develop these players. And so that's why I would be surprised if Walker or Gorman, either one, got traded this winter simply because of that.
You had to know I was going down the Jordan Walker path eventually. I mean, I could turn my camera here in my office to a baseball card case of about 50 Jordan Walker rookie cards that I bought 2 years ago for my grandsons to have, that right now are probably worth less than the case itself that they're in. What happened?
Be patient. Be patient.
Yes, exactly. I need Chaim to call me and say, just hold on. What happened there when you break it down? I mean, is he a mental mess right now? Can it be fixed?
Yes and yes. I mean, I think, the thing is, he was going to go to Duke when the Cardinals drafted. So he's not, he's a smart kid. I mean, he knows, what's going on. I just think whether it's that, age old cliche, paralysis by analysis or whatever, but I think he's had so many different people kind of telling him what to do. And I think the biggest thing that happened was when he got to the big leagues, he had a pretty good first season. He had 16, 18 home runs, something like that. And especially the last couple months of the season, I think it was hitting close to 300. But he just, the Cardinals said, "Oh, we want more of a power game out of you." So they tried to change his swing, tried to worry about launch angle and all that kind of stuff. And the guy hits the ball. When he hits the ball, sometimes, I mean, it's 110, 115 miles an hour. And I'm not a huge exit velocity guy, but I know it's hard. I mean, I know he hits the ball hard. And to me, a hard hit single is still a hit. And one of the guys that I've respected for a long time in baseball, that was a long time minor league official. We were talking about players. This is not just Jordan Walker. This is any young player. And he said almost always, universally, the last skill to come in a young player is power. And that, I think if you just left Jordan Walker alone, let him get those 110 mile an hour singles, I think eventually he's going to be a 20 to 25 home run hitter in the big leagues and hit for a decent average. But he just tries to do what everybody tells him to do, and it just hasn't worked out. So we'll see if there's any change in that with Chaim's influence as well or not.
Is playing the outfield making this worse for him at the plate? And I guess I lead into that by, does Wilson Contreras have to be a first baseman? Because you look around the league and first baseman hit 25, 30, 35 homers and drive in 100. And then you got this transplanted catcher at first base in St. Louis a lot of the time. Is there no room for Walker to play first?
Not right now. And actually, I think he got, I mean, he's not a Gold Glove outfielder, but he got much better in the outfield. He makes, he might make one bad play, every couple of weeks, but I mean, by and large, he makes the plays that he's supposed to make. Especially if you got a guy like Victor in center who, has so much speed, that he can kind of cover that gap in right field. They'll let Walker play a little bit more, closer to the line, but he's got a strong arm. I mean, I think, I don't think the outfield is the problem. And Contreras, if he's not going to catch, I mean, other than DH, I mean, I guess the one thing is you could move, Walker to first base and play Contreras as the DH, but I think there's a chance that they would move Contreras this winter as well. But I actually thought, I didn't know how it was going to go last year when they moved him to first base, but I actually thought he played pretty well there. I thought he did better than I expected him to do. So the thing that
catch? I mean, is he willing to catch if he goes somewhere or not?
I haven't heard anything new about that at all. So I don't know if he went to another club, if he'd want to catch or not. I mean, the whole idea to put him at first base was to try to keep him healthy so you could keep him in the lineup. I think what messed him up with the catching thing was they didn't know Herrera was going to be as bad as he was. They really thought that it would be more of a 50-50 split between him and Pais, and that they could live with that, temporarily. So I think the fact that and now it's going to be interesting because they say that Herrera's going to go, this winter and try to work out and come to camp next year as a catcher again. They talked about him being a left fielder, but that lasted all 4 games last year, and I don't know what happened to that idea. So he seemed like he was okay out there, caught the balls that were hit to him. So that's what I mean. They've just got some tough lineup decisions that their lineup's just out of whack, that they just need to kind of refigure some things.
Is Alec Burleson their best, most consistent player on this roster?
Second half of the season, I think he probably was. Yeah, as far as a hitter. And there's another guy who can play. I think first base is his best position as well. So if you were to move Contreras, then you just pencil Burleson in at first base and maybe occasionally a DH, and that, will help the balance in the outfield as well. So, yeah, he can hit. I mean, there's, he really kind of became a much better hitter against left-handed pitching. He realized he doesn't have to, he doesn't strike out all that much, but he does look for pitches that he can do damage with. And, he's, I think he's a 20 to 25 home run guy too.
Of course, down here, we've seen plenty of JJ Weatherhold over the last couple of years. And it appears that he's the hope. He's the guy to get people excited next spring and into the season. A, is there any chance he's not on the opening day roster? And B, where do you play him? I mean, is he a second baseman, shortstop, third baseman? In your mind, where will he wind up?
I'm guessing right now it'll be second base. He played that the least of all the three positions that he played this year, but I also asked him about it, and he said he played second so much in the past that he didn't really feel like he needed that much work there to play that position. He thought it was the easiest of the three. Played a lot of shortstop, but I think the expectation is they'll be on the opening day roster, but I don't think it's necessarily a given that it has to be. And I think that's just going to kind of be depending on what other moves that the club makes over the winter and where there's a spot available for him to play. Because if he's here, he's going to play.
Yeah. What does the pitching staff look like? The rotation, the back end. There's some guys out there that the Dylan Ceases. I mean, Jordan Montgomery, Ranger Suarez, guys like that out in free agency. Do the Cardinals stay pat for the most part? Kind of give us what you think that rotation looks like.
Yeah, I'd say you got three TBDs right now in that rotation to go with. I think it, because the problem is too with Tink battling some more injuries again this year with Dakota Roby and Jerpy having Tommy John surgery. I mean, some of your best pitching prospects are not ready to start the season. Quinn Matthews, as good as he was in Springfield, in 2024, did not have as good a season in 2025. So you don't know if that was just an outlier, and he'll come to spring training and blow everybody's eyes out and be able to be in this rotation from day one. I don't know, but I think right now you've got. I mean, Gray's another guy that you just don't know what his future is. He's talked about perhaps being willing to move somewhere else too. But if he's here, you got him, you got McGreevy, and you got Libator. I think are three, pretty solid guys. Palante is going to have to come to camp and pitch better than he did this season to get a spot, I think. And then I think you're going to open it up to Kyle Leahy, perhaps moving into the rotation. He's got the stuff to do that. So that would be one spot. And then you just have to kind of hope you get lucky. I think there's a chance they go out and find a free agent, on a 1 or 2 year deal that's not going to cost them a lot of money. That, maybe is a bounce back candidate kind of guy who has an off year or coming back from an injury or something like that. But they're not going to spend a lot of money in free agency, I don't think at all.
Yeah, you look at that, there's Chris Paddock out there and Dustin May, that was a Dodger prospect. And that's probably the bin they're going to shop in, isn't it? Those guys, and just try to catch lightning in a bottle with somebody that's not 35 or 38 years old.
That would be my guess. Yeah, somebody that's had some success in the big leagues, but has fallen off a little bit. So he's not going to want to, or not going to get a long-term contract, not going to get a lot of ton of money. Again, how much money this club has to spend is we don't know because they haven't said what the payroll is going to be, and part of that is going to be determined by what happens with the bigger contracts with Arenado and Gray and Contreras. So is that going to free up some money? I mean, they'll free up money with Michaelis leaving, but they're still going to probably be in the bottom half of the league in terms of payroll. So, and if they're not going to, again, be a contending necessarily club for first place, I don't see them going out of their way to spend a lot of money just to spend it.
Who's ready in the minors in your mind, double A or triple A, ready to make the leap at some point next year?
Well, I mean, Church, had got a chance at the end of this year, and so his future's got to be determined by what other moves they make in the outfield. I think they're going to give Quinn Matthews a shot to see what he can do. And then JJ, of course, I think is ready. I don't know right now that they have anybody other than that. I mean, Crooks, came up and played some. I think right now you're going to pencil him in as be one of the, platoon of catchers next year. The guys that they had at Springfield have had a great year. You had, Eshawn Henderson, you had, Joshua Baez. I think all had really Bernal are all guys that they're counting on, sooner rather than later. But I don't know sooner is, at the start of next season.
Springfield Cardinals win their first Texas League title since 2012. How much does a big league organization, the front office, care about winning like that at those levels? I mean, obviously it means that guys were able to play well together and put it together at the right time. But kind of what's the approach by the front offices about minor league success?
Well, I think it's important. But it's not as important as player development. I think that player development trumps winning, but I think they see it as being a key ingredient. They see it as being a key element to, other guys, have come up in the past have talked about how you helps you build that culture, that winning attitude every day when you go to the ballpark, that you're trying to win and trying to play for something bigger than yourself, which is what they obviously want to do when they get to the big leagues as well. So I think it's important. And I think the fact that team had the year that it had is really good. Memphis was actually better this year than they've been in the past too, even though they didn't make the postseason. So, I think that is important. Palm Beach won the Florida State League title in 2024. So, that's something for those guys to build around.
Look around at that NL Central, what everybody should or will have back, the good young talent. Are the Cardinals the fifth best team talent-wise in that division?
Hard to say about Pittsburgh. I mean, they've got a lot of good young prospects. They've got a lot of good young pitching, but I think they're right now they finished fourth for a reason, and I think that's probably where you would pencil them in to start next season. Pirates, can get better. I think they've still got a lot of holes in their organization too, but they've got a couple of really good. You saw what Skeens could do. You saw what some of their other young pitchers could do. You've got a kid. They've got Connor Griffin coming, who's probably the best prospect in baseball, or one of the top 2 or 3 prospects in baseball. So, the Cardinals had to have some things go right for them, or they could fall behind the Pirates. There's no question.
Anybody up at the top that's set for a few years in that regard and in that division? I mean, is it the Reds, the Cubs, the Brewers with their young talent, or how do you see that?
Well, you always look at Milwaukee every year and say, well, they're not going to be able to do that again, and then they go out and do it or play even better. So, I'm a big Pat Murphy fan. I've known Pat for 30 years. We go back to Arizona State together in 1995. So I think he's just a terrific manager, and it doesn't surprise me that they've had the success that they've had because of him. And I think that's what the Cardinals want to be. They want to play like the Brewers, and they've gotten away from that the last few years, and that's what they need to get back to.
Rob, always a pleasure to catch up with you. Again, tell us about stlsportspage.com.
Full service website, obviously full coverage of the Cardinals, a lot of minor league coverage as well. So we do some entertainment and cooking and lifestyle features as well. So you can get to it directly on the internet, stlsportspage.com. We also have a weekly newsletter that you can sign up for on the newsletter. So you get all the links to stories that you might miss during the week, as well as some other stuff that we put in the newsletter, which may not necessarily appear elsewhere on the site, and obviously the links to the podcast as well. So it's it's been fun. We've been doing the thing about 12, 13 years now, and it's grown, and we're really, really happy with it. And response to the stories that we do lets me do what I like to do, which is still go out there and write about baseball.
Awesome. Rob, let's stay in touch. And again, thanks.
Anytime.
Rob Raines, always appreciate his time. Didn't mean to cut him off there just a second early there, but good guy, Kickapoo grad, and does a tremendous job in covering the Cardinals. So if you're a Cardinal fan, highly recommend visiting stlsportspage.com to stay up on what's going on in St. Louis. Big thank you to our sponsors. Our sponsor, Thompson Sales, located at 1555 East Independence in South Springfield. Been in business since 1919, have the Thompson boys, and they're your home for the largest selection of Cadillac, Buick, and GMC cars and trucks in the Ozarks. New and used, they've got them both. A great service department to take care of your vehicles from start to finish. When you're ready to trade them back in at Thompson's, get another great deal. It's the Thompson boys, and they've been doing it, as I said, since 1919. Been a longtime customer because they treat you like family at Thompson Sales. And a big welcome to our latest sponsor, Colton Steakhouse of Springfield. They're located at 2020 East Independence, just down the street from Thompson's. You'll have trouble finding a better meal for a better price in the Ozarks, whether it's their steaks, their burgers, their tremendous barbecue, and those wonderful hot rolls and butter and honey, the peanuts too. It's all good stuff at Colton Steakhouse. Go see owner Thomas Orr and his folks at Colton Steakhouse, 2020 East Independence Road in Springfield. That's going to do it for this week. We'll see you next week on Around the Ozarks.